Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode in my new series on Capture One Pro. In this series, I'm going to teach you exactly what Capture One is and show you how to use it. Now, the first episode today is going to be a quick tour of Capture One, and I'm going to explain what Capture One actually is. When I decided to explain what Capture One is, I thought this will be really easy. I use it every single day, so I can definitely explain what it is. But I've actually done lots of takes of this, and I'm finding it quite hard to explain. I think it's because there's quite a lot of things you can do with Capture One, so it's quite hard to nail it down into one category. I think at its core, it is an image editing piece of software. That means it takes your raw images captured on your camera, you take them into Capture One and you can edit them. So you can add adjustments to them, be them curves, contrast, clarity, color, whatever. You can edit them inside of Capture One, just like you would do inside of Lightroom, similar to Photoshop as well. You can make those kinds of adjustments. But it's also a piece of software that you can use for tethering. So if you're connecting your camera to your computer and you want to see a larger preview of your image as you take a photo, then Capture One will do that, and it's fantastic for doing that. Finally, it's also a piece of software where you can organize your images. Capture One has two main ways of working. You can either work in catalogs or in sessions. Catalogs are kind of self-explanatory. It allows you to catalog all of your images. So you might have like a portfolio catalog where that will have all of your best images inside of it. Sessions are a little bit different, and they're actually how I work. So sessions, you might have a session just for one particular job. So if I start a job, say I'm doing an image of a bottle or whatever, I start a session in the morning, and when that session ends, that's the end of that session. I don't need to look at it again. I export my final images, I select them, take them to Photoshop, and that's done. I back up the session, but I never really have to return to it. If I wanted to, I would then take the final images and put them into a portfolio catalog. Now, personally, I don't actually use Capture One for the catalog functionality. I use a program called Lightroom, which many of you are probably familiar with. I prefer the way that is for what's called a digital asset management. That's just a posh way of saying this is where I store my files. So I prefer how Lightroom is for that. However, I made that decision quite a few years ago, and I know Capture One now has a program called, I think it's Capture One Media SE, something like that. And that might be a lot better. But anyway, we're taking too long here. Let's jump straight into Capture One. I'll give you a quick tour of the program, and then we can jump on to the next video. So now we're inside Capture One. As you can see, it looks like quite a complicated piece of software, but I promise you it really isn't that bad. First things first though, one of the great things about Capture One is that you can customize it in so many different ways. And that's fantastic. I'm going to do a video on that at a later stage. But while you're learning, I really think it's important to have consistency. If things aren't consistent, then it can get very confusing. So I would always recommend, first thing you do, go to Window, Workspace, and Default. And you see everything there just kind of snapped into different positions. This is the default workspace for Capture One. And in exactly the same way, and for the same reasons, go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and then change here to Capture One Default. It would usually be on here, Max's Shortcuts, but I would just say change it to Capture One Default, and then at least it's always the same every time you go to it. Eventually you can change all that stuff around, but initially while you're learning, leave it on the defaults. Now, I am a PC person, so my version of Capture One is on PC. There's very subtle differences between PC and Mac. I use both regularly, but I am a PC person. That's a whole other story. But just note, there are tiny differences. I'll try and point them out as I get to them if I remember, but it's mostly exactly the same. So the 4 areas I'm going to take you through on this quick tour of Capture One are this area here, which is known as the browser, this area here, which is the viewer, then we have the adjustment tabs here, and up here in this area is the toolbar. So the browser over this side is where all of your images are going to come in. So if I capture an image now, it's just going to be black because my lights are turned off, but you'll see it will jump in a second. It can take a little while if you've not been using it for a bit, but you see it jumped in there. So this is where your new images jump in. This is where all your images are going to be shown. So it's like a little bar here where all your images are. You can sort the images by various parameters by clicking up here. You can sort them by date, name, color tag, rating. It will tell you how many images there are. You can zoom in and zoom out, and you can search for images as well. So that's it, that's the browser. It's very useful. You can hide this area here called the viewer by hitting Control Alt and V on a PC or Command Option and V on a Mac. And this is just another way of seeing the browser. So you see it's a big grid of all your images, but usually it's kept over here on the right hand side. All right, I'm just going to delete this as well by hitting delete on my keyboard because I don't want that. So then here we have the viewer. When you select an image in the browser, you'll see that it has a white line around it. That shows you that it's selected, and then that means you'll be able to see it inside the viewer, as we are here. The viewer has a couple little controls. You can zoom in. You can also use short keys. I'll make a video on short keys at a later stage. You then got up here, you see in this area, as I move my mouse around, you see all the values changing. These are our RGB, and I believe that would be that number on the right, the one that says 154 right now. I think that would be luminance. So obviously we have red, green, blue, and I think that's luminance. And that just tells you the values of your image as you move around. On this little bit here, we can select the layer that we're working on. Background is the default layer. I'm going to get into layers in a later video. Then we also have part to do with our view. So this is the proof margin. I never really use this. I always just have that off. And then we have a little button here which allows us to view either one image or multiple images. So if I select, let's say I select 4 images by holding Shift and then clicking on another image in the browser, and you see it selected these 4 images. They all have an outline, but this one here has a stronger outline around it. That means that's our primary image. And as you can see right now, if I hover over here, this is to toggle between primary and multiple view. So if I turn that off, then even though all of those are selected, we're only seeing the primary image. You see it changes there. If I turn that back on, then we see all 4 images that are selected, or however many you do end up selecting. So I'll just turn that back off. That's the viewer, nice and simple. Underneath you have some metadata, tells you the ISO, shutter speed, aperture, the name of the file, the color tag if it has any, and then the ratings if it has any. In this section we have the adjustment tabs. We have everything from finding your images on your computer to rating them, and then all of these different tabs up here are all about editing them. Most of it is quite self-explanatory. I'm gonna explain a lot more of it in future videos, but if you wanna dive in now, don't worry about ruining your images. Like I said, Capture One is a raw image editor, so you're never going to ruin the raw image file. Even when you process an image, Capture One will create a new image and leave your raw file there. So you can muck around with any of the settings you see in there, see what they do for yourself, and you're not going to ruin your photo, so don't worry about that. Other than the adjustments tabs, up top we have the toolbar. In the toolbar you have lots of different settings. I'll go through it properly at a later stage, but if you want you can just hover over each one and it will tell you what each setting is. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. Some of them might be a little bit confusing, but for the most part it's all quite obvious. And then here, these are kind of like your hand tools. So at the minute I'm on the pan tool, which you can access by hitting H. This just allows me to double click, zoom into an image, and then I can click and pan around that image. And if I double click again, it zooms back out. We also have an arrow tool, which I have to admit I'd never use. I always just use the pan tool. And then we have various other ones. You have ones for cropping, for rotating, for brush tool, for all these little kind of things. You can just go through them and experiment. That's it for our introduction to Capture One. In the next video, we're going to go through the library tab. I'm going to show you about filtering and the session folders and all that kind of stuff. For the moment, no, we're done. So if you have any questions, chuck them in the comments. If you want to see that next video, make sure you hit subscribe and don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. All right, thanks guys. I'll catch you later.